Hey everybody, this video you're about to see is another video from my main program, Mental and Emotional Mastery, where we help people overcome depression and anxiety, typically in around 3 months. And I wanted you to have this free to the public because it's a very powerful video that describes something that just about anybody who's struggling with their mental health can really relate to, particularly if you ever feel like you get into really overwhelming emotional states. So things like panic attacks, or if you really feel like you get into what we call the downward spiral, where you feel like you can't get out of it. The fastest way to do it is to prevent it from happening in the first place. And you're going to learn why you spiral through this little process, and it'll be very illuminating for you, and I'm sure it'll help you tremendously. So without further ado, this is the training video from Mental and Emotional Mastery on the death spiral. Enjoy it.
All right, everybody, welcome back. So if you are jumping in from the last video, we were just exploring the triad, right? The three forces that really determine how you feel in any given moment of any day. And now you should have a very solid understanding of what is making up those specific emotional patterns that are largely dominating your life. And what we also uncovered is that those patterns determine how you feel on a regular basis, of course, and then how you feel in any given moment largely determines what you are going to do in any given moment. And then, of course, the behaviors that you habitually run create different results that create a different destiny that you're going to arrive at. So today what I want to do is give you another distinction that I call affectionately the death spiral, which is something that is important to understand, especially if you're dealing with some serious mental health challenges. So this would apply to just about anybody who's dealing with something that would have been diagnosed as anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD, anything along those lines. And I want to share with you how this works. So building off of the core understanding we have of the triad, what we know is that in any given moment, you're going to start to feel potentially a little depressed or a little anxious, or you might remember something a little bit traumatic from your past, or what have you. And then very often what can happen is it seems to go from 0 to 100 incredibly quickly. And you will feel like you're driving that metaphorical car on the road that I gave you that metaphor last time, and your car starts spinning out of control and you're looking directly at the tree, and then boom, you hit the tree, right? So you're spiraling out is kind of how I call it. So what we want to do is help you understand how that happens and how to prevent that from happening. So the thing to remember is, if you recall from our last video, I helped you understand the triad, right? How you can only feel anxious or depressed, or you can only feel a sense of having a sense of trauma about you if you are focusing on particular things, if you are giving a specific language and meaning to your circumstances, and if your physiology is in a particular form, right? So your emotions are not random. They are from these three core components, okay, is what makes up your emotions. Depression and anxiety are not things that just happen to you. They don't just come out of the blue. They don't just hit you like a comet out of the sky. They don't just rise up as some automatic biochemical thing. It happens through a pattern of focus, a pattern of language and meaning, and a pattern of physiology. It's the only way it can happen. So we have to understand that you can no longer blame your genetics or your background or your circumstances or whatever. It's all happening internally, and it's all happening through forces that can be shifted. Now, those patterns have become developed and worn in over time, so we have to work at them a little bit and work on shifting them whenever they pop up. But just remember that this is not random. Now, what's also not random is how it escalates very high, because what will happen is this. You'll start with your first triad. Okay, you'll start by feeling, where you're focusing on something that doesn't serve you. You're being out of work, being in debt, being cheated on, right? Any of those examples we gave you. You'll have a negative language pattern, right? That is limiting you. This is so irritating. Why would this happen to me? Are you kidding me? Right? Head down, shoulders down, breathing shallow, irregular, right? you'd have this triad. That's what we would call it. This is your triad in that moment. So you would start to feel yourself feeling either depressed or anxious or what have you. Now, here's what happens interestingly after that first triad is ran, and that could all happen within inside of just a few seconds. What happens next is a stacking triad happens next, where your triad is now becoming more intense, okay? So not only are you focusing on whatever it was that caused you to feel upset, but now you are not only focusing on that, but you're actually focusing on the fear of an episode beginning. All right. So in other words, in phase 1, you're feeling a little anxiety. In phase 2, you're getting fearful, and literally you're feeling anxious about feeling anxiety. You're worried that you're about to feel anxiety, and you're starting to develop a fear that it's going to happen. And so now the spiral has begun. Okay. And so the other thing that will happen here is not only are you worrying about being out of work, but as soon as you start thinking about, oh God, I'm out of work, then you start to think about the bills and the kids and the diapers and this and that and that. So now you're going into multiple layers deep of what was initially just a single layer triad, okay? Now, the other problem with this from a language and meaning perspective is you end up saying things to yourself like, I'm so worthless, right? You end up taking what is actually just trying to get my little laser pointer here. Hold on one sec. Okay, doesn't look like that's going to work. So that's okay. Sorry, forgive me for that. I was trying to get my laser pointer up, but that's no worries. So instead of you just saying, this is so irritating, where you're describing the situation you're in, you now might be saying, I'm so worthless. So you've gone from describing the situation to describing yourself. And this is very often what happens. Not only that, but that voice inside of your head that is saying these horrible things is increasing in volume, sometimes increasing in tempo, right? So you start from just like a little bit of focus, a little bit of language, a little bit of physiology, to now things are escalating very quickly, okay? And it's really just a more extensive triad that is coming in. And now you're going to be breathing highly irregularly. Some people will rub their head, or they'll have like a little tick that they're doing. They might fidget with their feet or their hands or their legs, or they might start crying. Okay, so now you're going to start feeling even worse. Okay, and so now in, say, like the final stage here, even though there really is no cap to this, I mean, you could continue to feel worse and worse and worse. Now your focus is on the fact that you seem to be having an anxiety attack, or your focus is on the fact that you're feeling so depressed, and now you're getting to a very, very dark place, okay? So now your focus is not just on the initial thing that caused you to feel this way, like being out of work or being in debt, but you are now worried about losing control. Some people at this point are starting to think, do I need to go to the hospital, okay? So you're worried about losing control. You're focusing on the changes in your physiology, right? So now your heart has been beating, right? Because that's what's happening here, right? In this last phase, your breathing is irregular. Your heart is probably beating fast. So now you're focusing on that too. And you're going, what the hell is going on with me? Why is this happening? And inside of your mind, you're now further exaggerating the language patterns. So you might be saying something like, stop it, stop it, stop it, or no, not again, or I'm having a panic attack, or, get me out of here, or something like that, where you might be screaming inside of your head and you're having just crazy language patterns, right? So you're further escalating the triad more and more, and then you're hyperventilating, maybe heart palpitations, tremors even, some people deal with hysterical crying, and it goes on and on from here. So what I want you to get is that this process is not random. What it is a systemic process of you focusing on things that don't serve you, applying language patterns to what's going on that don't serve you, and adjusting your physiology in a way that doesn't serve you, that then repeats itself and feeds at a deeper and deeper level. So the easiest way to stop this is to not allow it to start. But the second easiest way to stop this is to simply be able to shift and focus on something different, or change what you're saying to yourself inside of your head, or change your physiology, okay? Just like I mentioned in our last video. Now, again, like I said, you're on that icy road. If you continue to focus on the thing that's bothering you, that's where you're going to end up driving. If you continue to say things that aren't going to serve you, you're going to keep going in the wrong direction, and that's not what you want to do, obviously. Now, the good news is that this works in the opposite direction too. So just like you can, you know, become in a spiraling state that's negative, you can actually spiral upwards, okay, which is really exciting. And so it works in the exact same way. You know, you focus on something that makes you feel grateful. You apply a language and meaning pattern to it that says, wow, this is great, right? Or you start to breathe deeply and you start to calm your nervous system down and oxygenate your nervous system. And then all of a sudden, as soon as you're there, there's a deeper layer that you can get to of higher gratitude or ambition or excitement or confidence, right? And all of a sudden, your brain is quite literally rewiring itself. It's getting new neuroassociations about what you want to be feeling in that moment. So you can absolutely spiral upwards too, which is really exciting. And there's no limit to how good you can feel. And again, the biggest ways that you're going to be able to focus, change that is adjusting your focus and adjusting your physiology will be very important for you. Okay. So I want you to get that if you're having anxiety attacks or panic attacks, it all still fundamentally comes down to the triad. You got to take control of the triad. You got to figure out what is your specific triad. You got to isolate. What are the language patterns that are getting in your way? How do you remove them from your life, right? How do you scramble up those specific patterns? And that's what we're going to be digging into here shortly, is how you actually make sure those patterns don't become automatic for you. But first, you got to get clear on what they are, okay? So I hope this has been insightful for you, and very excited to keep things moving into the next video. I'll see you there.